The theft of the century. Inside Einstein's stolen brain. What if I told you that the smartest man in history didn't rest in peace, but spent decades inside a cider box underneath a beer cooler? Why did a pathologist steal Albert Einstein's brain and hide it from the world for nearly 30 years? And when scientists finally unlocked the secrets of his gray matter, did they find the physical source of his genius? Or just a normal human organ? The year was 1955. The place was Princeton Hospital in New Jersey. The world had just lost its most beloved physicist, the man who redefined time and space. But while the world mourned, one man in the morgue was making a decision that would spark a half-century of controversy, scientific debate, and bizarre road trips. This is the story of how Einstein's brain was stolen, lost, found, and what it ultimately taught us about human intelligence. The unauthorized autopsy. Albert Einstein knew the world was obsessed with him. He was a celebrity scientist, a freak of nature in the eyes of the public. He feared that in death, his body would become an object of worship or morbid curiosity. Because of this, he left very specific instructions. He wanted to be cremated, and his ashes scattered in secret. He wanted no shrine, no museum, and certainly no physical remains left behind. He almost got his wish. On April 18, 1955, Einstein died of a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. The pathologist on call was Dr. Thomas Harvey. Harvey was not a neuroscientist. He was not a brain specialist. He was simply the man with the scalpel that morning. During the autopsy, Harvey determined the cause of death. But then, in a moment of audacious impulse, he went further. He sawed open the cranium. He severed the spinal cord, removed the brain, and weighed it. Instead of putting it back, he placed it in a jar of formalin. When Einstein's body was cremated later that day, his brain was not with him. The theft was discovered days later. Einstein's son, Hans Albert, was furious. The hospital was scandalized. Dr. Harvey was nearly fired on the spot. However, Harvey managed to convince Hans Albert that the deed was done for the sake of history. He made a solemn promise. The brain would be used only for scientific study, to understand the nature of genius. Reluctantly, the family agreed. But the scientific study didn't happen. At least, not for a very long time. The brain in a cider box. Instead of being studied in a prestigious university lab, Einstein's brain went on a bizarre journey. Dr. Harvey lost his job at Princeton Hospital shortly after the incident, refusing to give up the brain. He took the brain with him. For decades, the most valuable biological specimen in scientific history sat in 2 mason jars, submerged in preservatives, inside a cardboard cider box. It moved with Harvey to Wichita, Kansas, where he worked as a biological testing lab supervisor. It sat behind a beer cooler. It moved to Missouri. It was, for all intents and purposes, missing. The scientific community largely forgot about it, assuming the brain was lost or destroyed. It wasn't until 1978, when a reporter named Stephen Levy tracked Harvey down, that the world rediscovered the brain. Harvey had sectioned the brain into 240 blocks and created 1.000 microscopic slides. Yet, he had published nothing. He was hoarding the genius. Under pressure from the media and the scientific community, Harvey finally began sending small slices to neuroscientists who asked for them. What did they find? When scientists finally put Einstein's brain under the microscope, they were looking for something obvious. Was it bigger? Was it heavier? The first surprise was a disappointment. No. Einstein's brain weighed 1.230 grams. This is actually lighter than the average adult male brain, which is usually around 1.400 grams. So, size does not equal intelligence. If it's not the hardware size, it must be the wiring. Over the years, 3 major studies revealed distinct anomalies that separated Einstein from the average human. 1. The glial cells, the energy support. In 1985, Dr. Marion Diamond from UC Berkeley published the first study. She compared Einstein's brain to a control group of 11 normal male brains. She found that in the left inferior parietal lobe, an area associated with mathematical thought and imagery, Einstein had a significantly higher ratio of glial cells to neurons. Think of neurons as the thinking unit and glial cells as the support staff. Glial cells provide nutrients and clean up waste. The implication was that Einstein's neurons were working so hard, firing so metabolically high, that they needed a larger support crew to keep them functioning. His brain was physically hungrier than the average person's. 2. The missing valley, the parietal lobe. In 1999, Dr. Sandra Whittleson at McMaster University conducted a visual analysis of the brain's anatomy. She discovered something shocking. Most human brains have a deep groove running through the parietal lobe called the Sylvian fissure. In Einstein's brain, this groove was partially missing. His parietal lobes were 15% wider than normal. Why does this matter? The parietal lobe is the command center for spatial reasoning, mathematical ability, and 3D visualization. Because the deep groove was missing, the nerves in Einstein's brain could pack in tighter and connect more directly. It was like removing a roadblock on a highway. This anatomical quirk perfectly explains Einstein's own description of his thinking process. He once said he didn't think in words, but in pictures and geometrical structures, the famous Gedanken experiment, thought experiments, that led to the theory of relativity. 3. The superhighway, the corpus callosum. In 2013, a study using high-resolution photographs of the brain slices found that Einstein's corpus callosum, the bridge of fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres of the brain, was thicker than average. The left brain is typically logical and analytical. The right brain is creative and artistic. A thicker connection suggests that Einstein had superior communication between the two sides. He could marry complex mathematical logic with wild, creative imagination. Nature or nurture? These findings are fascinating, but they leave us with a chicken or the egg question. Did Einstein have these brain anomalies at birth, which destined him to become a physicist? Or did his intense lifetime of deep thinking, violin playing, and mathematical obsession physically rewire his brain? Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, is real. A bodybuilder has bigger muscles because he lifts weights. Perhaps Einstein's parietal lobes were 15% wider because he spent 50 years exercising them. However, the missing Sylvian fissure suggests a genetic anomaly. You cannot think a groove out of existence. It seems Einstein was born with a unique piece of hardware, but it was his curiosity and persistence that installed the software of genius. The final resting place. Dr. Thomas Harvey died in 2007. Before his death, he returned the remaining pieces of the brain to Princeton Hospital. Closing the circle. Today, you can actually see slices of Einstein's brain at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. So, was it worth the theft? Was it worth violating a dying man's wish? Scientifically, we learned that genius isn't about brain size, it's about connectivity and organization. But perhaps the greatest lesson comes not from the microscope, but from the man himself. Einstein's brain was special, yes, but thousands of people are born with anatomical anomalies every day. It wasn't the glial cells that discovered E equals mx squared. It was the relentless curiosity of the personality inhabiting them. As Einstein famously said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." Maybe the key to the universe isn't in the anatomy of a stolen brain, but in the way we choose to use the one we have.